Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brownstone. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle, and you are listening to Numbers Don't Lie, where you learn to get out your feelings so you can make the best decisions for yourself, your family, and your business. Guys, I have a special treat for you today. We are talking to a phenomenal woman that's all about community. Okay. So if you're a nonprofit leader, honestly, if you're a leader, lean in because she has something to tell you. She has a vast amount of experience mentoring, telling people and showing them how to get to the money. So that's what I'm saying. You need to lean in. So I don't think I can really do her justice. She's the CEO of Giving Blueprint. She also has a mentor and education space to help nonprofits not just survive, but thrive so they can have the greatest impact on their community. So, Brownstone community, please help me welcome Kimberly O'Neill.
How are you today?
Oh, I'm so good. She said yes to being here. That's my heart is full because she's here. So
Oh,
just go ahead and prepare to have your hearts warmed, like your whole life blown, your whole mind blown. Kim, go tell them about how the bomb you are. Go ahead, girl.
oh gosh. So my name is Kimberly O'Neill. As Dr. Michelle said, I'm the CEO of Giving Blueprint. I'm also the founder of Cause Studio, which is a professional development initiative for Black-led nonprofit startups around the country. I am seasoned. So I say a mentally retired senior government executive. I have served as a city manager of a small city in Maryland. I have worked in municipal governments around the country. At the time, I was the youngest Black woman to be appointed a city manager in this country. I have managed economic development projects. I have done so much. I've helped to lead a court, a municipal court, one of the top 5 courts in the state of Texas. And in 2011, I left it all. And started a consulting company on January 1st, 2011 was my official full-time start date. And that's when Giving Blueprint was formed. And at the time, I had previously worked for a retired NFL player, now Pro Football Hall of Famer. I ran his family foundation for about 2 years. They're actually still a client of mine, but there's a lesson that I learned from working with him. And it was, if you can do community and serve community from the depth of your soul, and as a business owner, if you can incorporate giving back as a part of your business model, not just this add-on thing that you
Mm.
do, how much greater could our communities be? And then I looked at athletes around different leagues, and I would see organizations that would start and that would fail because families and friends and moms and wives were running it without background and understanding that a nonprofit is an actual business with IRS requirements linked to it. And so Giving Blueprint launched as an opportunity to work with athletes and encourage them not to start nonprofits, but to lend their time, talent, treasures, and other resources to organizations that we would vet for them. So based on their natural inclination for giving, we would interview them. We would bring back 3 organizations based on that. And what we asked of them is that they stayed in the life of the organization for at least a year. So
Mhm.
even if they wanted to write a one-time check, are there other opportunities that could exist that might help you to lean in a lot differently to that organization? And from that, the small little organizations started coming to me and saying, we want an athlete. And I was like, that's not really how this works, right? Because there's a vetting process. But there was an opportunity to fill in a gap because where some of those organizations were, there was no opportunity for me to even consider them because there was some sort of due diligence that had to be done. People were putting their personal brands on the line. So if they weren't in a stable place, I couldn't make that recommendation.
Mhm.
But what I realized is that there were some smaller organizations that really needed support, that most of the training that we found around the country wasn't geared towards small nonprofits. And many people say, we have more than a million. Actually, I think now we're up to like almost 1.8 million 501c3s throughout this country. And people were saying, we don't need another one. We don't need another one that's not efficient. We
Mhm.
don't need another one that's not effective. But sometimes these smaller, newer nonprofits, what I found, Dr. Michelle, is that they are serving in pockets of the community that are sometimes overlooked. So there is some level of differentiation. And if we could train those particular organizations a lot differently, could we see the impact, that charitable impact that the larger and the mid-sized organizations were doing as well? And so I'm a kid from New York who grew up during the height of hip hop starting, and that really rooted me a lot in community. So I took everything that I learned from government and I decided to bring it on the other side to serve community a lot differently.
Y'all, Kim, y'all see why this episode is called Unlocking the Six. I said the success. Why this episode is called Unlocking the Secrets of Nonprofit Success. That is a tongue twister.
It is a tongue twister, but it's a true
Child.
one, right? It's a true statement because it's not that hard. It really isn't that hard if people are stepping up to the table, because I think there's a lot of pieces to it, right? It's the people that want to start or have started a nonprofit and understanding they're running a business that just happens to be a charity, that
Mm-hmm.
there are rules and regulations that they have to follow, and that they don't own it. And so when you create it, I always tell people, you have to create this knowing that someday you may be removed from leadership. You
Wow.
have to create this knowing that one day there might be somebody else that's better that can take your vision and innovate it and take it to the next level. You also have to be prepared for your board to remove you,
Mm.
any association, and that's legal, right? But then there's also the other part about funders and getting funders to understand that the world is changing. People who are leading nonprofits are changing. If we look at the more traditional ways of giving back to nonprofits, we look at the older end of Gen X and above, right? So Gen X, baby boomers, and then the silent generation, right? Those that were around during World War II, they give a lot differently,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I am in the upper end of the Gen X group, but Gen X gives a little bit more traditionally as well, depending upon where you fall within that spectrum. But when you talk about millennials and lower, their way of looking at social impact, it's so different. And so from a funding perspective, we all have to start looking at how do we fund organizations. It's not going to look the way that it did before. Organizations are not operating the way that they did before. We are still trying to operate and kind of govern nonprofits and how they look and how they move based on pre-technology eras.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
It's
good.
ridiculous. Information is spitting out so quickly that these more traditional ways can't be the only way or the primary way. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of, we're now talking about trust-based philanthropy, community-centered philanthropy, where the community is guiding, where we're removing some of the hoops and the hurdles, where we're looking at smaller organizations that actually have a tie to the community versus people who want to give back to the community, but honestly don't have any input from the community and
Mm.
sometimes have never stepped foot in the
That
communities,
part.
right? So that's more of assimilation than social innovation and change. And I
Mm.
always say, do we want to focus on assimilation, or do we want to focus on change that's based on the culturally relevant things that are beneficial to that community? Because who am I to say something is wrong when I'm not from a community? I really don't understand the challenges, and I'm interpreting it from my lens, not a legal right or wrong lens, but simply because of my lens and how I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's so many different facets that you have to look at when you're talking about how do we build a successful nonprofit, and then how do we build trust around the work that we're doing too.
Yeah, that's good. You touched, I like how you touched on people from outside the community doing things. And I feel like that has been such a part of our history and the reason why we haven't really seen the needle being moved in a lot of areas. I have a public health background. And so it's been, it's a whole like degree focus of community. Was it participatory community? I'm probably mixing it up, but you know what I'm talking about,
So, yeah, yeah,
but understanding how to really engage a community. And one of their big principles is you have to engage the people that you want to impact. Like you can't just have, outsiders come in and like, have this like white savior mentality. Cause it's just like, we're just kind of like, who are you? We don't know
yeah,
you. We don't trust you. We don't know what your motives are, especially in the public health world. Like things have been done to us. So who,
absolutely.
so I
There's a lot
love
of
that.
trauma. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of trauma. There's a lot of there's a lack of trust. And there are people that believe, I'm going to give you an example, because I think this is going to nail it. I sat on a board and I left a board like in a short amount of time.
Wow.
I was sitting in a board meeting, and the co-founder was sharing what she thought was I did the right thing story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an organization that's not run by any Black women or men at all. It's an organization that serves 100% Black and Latina women, girls. And in that meeting, she talked about the fact that they had taken the girls who are in high school to a field trip.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 100 and something degree day here in Texas. And their staff called and said, "Can we get the girls something to eat and drink?" And she said, "No, it's not in the budget."
Excuse me? So you submitted grant application after grant application have come up empty, right? You thought you gave them everything that they're looking for, you answered all the questions, but it just doesn't seem to make the cut. Chances are you've been doing it wrong. But that is what we're here to show you here at Grant Success Unlocked. This workshop will tell you exactly what grant funders want and what grant reviewers are looking for so you can give them an application that wows. We're going to show you how to quantify your impact so that way it's a no-brainer to give you the money to further the mission and the vision that you have. Invite your colleagues because this workshop is going to revolutionize how you write applications from here on out. I promise you, you do not want to miss it. Register now at grantsuccessunlocked.com. That's grantsuccessunlocked.com. Click the link now before seats fill up, and I'm going to see you there. You're listening to Numbers Don't Lie on KCCR The Brownstone. You can listen to us on the app that you can download right now or on brownstoneworldwide.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at Brownstone Worldwide to learn all what's happening on everything Brownstone in our world. Be sure to subscribe to Brownstone Living Magazine. We have some really exciting articles about what's happening in your community. Guys, we have so many exciting things happening with Brownstone. So you want to make sure you stay plugged in, stay connected to us. We're coming to your neighborhood. Now let's head on back to listen to what's going on Numbers Don't Lie.
Before I could say anything, an Asian woman on the board said, "Would you do that to your children?" She said, "No." And my response was, "Then you never take them on a field trip if you can't feed or provide a beverage to girls who are already coming from homes and situations where they already feel like people have isolated them or disconnected from them. But if you can't do right by children,
That part.
children who you've interpreted to be young adults, but children on a field trip, we would be up in arms if that happened at a school.
Mm-hmm.
We would be up in arms if this happened anywhere in middle class or better America.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about girls who have dropped out of school, who have had some sort of criminal justice background, who come from families who don't know where they are, what they're doing, young girls who have had children, that you would take them out on a triple digit heat day here in Texas and not provide. And I said, that's a liability.
Right.
And so there was some unlearning, but it also subconsciously, do I think that they did it intentionally? I do not. But what happens when we don't have people at the table that represent or can speak on behalf of the communities that are being served?
Mm-hmm.
We miss the real conversations about why would you do that? That is wrong. That is a liability. These are children.
Yep.
Right. And so it's important that we have representation and that we're not just talking about it from a passion perspective, which I think a lot of people that found nonprofits, regardless of who they are and what they look like, they found organizations because they saw an issue, didn't do any research, and they jump in without really understanding what they're getting into.
Yeah.
So it's passion fueled discussion and initiative that they launched. And I say, when you bring in the data, you can streamline, you can scale, you can sustain, and actually you can dissolve. Because if you bring in the data and recognize, I had no business starting this, then you can dissolve with honor.
Wow.
right? Because you're fighting a battle that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to encourage people to go to the data first to make sure that we have that representation in leadership, whether it be the board or just in day-to-day operations, because otherwise, Dr. Michelle, it is saviorism. And
Mm-hmm.
I speak very loudly and proudly about that, that we don't need saviorism. We need people that are committed to changing lives in the community. We
Absolutely.
don't need to save people and tell them what they don't need to be doing, because many times it's not just the community, it's all of the resources or lack of resources
Mm-hmm.
available that really are detrimental to the communities that I serve anyway.
Yeah. That's good. I went to I guess a little symposium, and the particular session I went to was about maternal health. And it
Mhm.
was some doctors that were over this particular program. And I loved it. He said, we started even changing our language because
Mhm.
it's so easy to say, you should have done this. Why didn't you come to your appointment? You're non compliant. But it's like, if you actually take a step back and realize where they don't even say non-compliant or non-compliant anymore. They say, I forgot the word they use, but it pretty much it takes the negativity off of it, because some people don't not want to follow directions. Sometimes they don't have a choice. They didn't have a ride. They didn't have the resources. And when you take away, like you said, that community voice to help you understand, like, oh, this person has difficulties. They have to work or whatever, and they couldn't take off. Like they have to feed their family, as opposed to someone so far removed that doesn't understand that struggle. It's so easy to attach negative stigmas, and this what you wag your finger, and it's just like now the people that you want to help don't want no parts, because
Right.
you're trying to tell me how to be me or how to be better, when it's like I'm doing my best, and you're
Yes.
not even acknowledging that I'm doing my best.
No. There's a woman that I work with here. Her name is Dania Carter, and she's the founder of Heart of Courage. And they focus on supporting families, primarily moms at this time, who are in jeopardy of losing their children to the child welfare system, or their children have already been
Mm-hmm.
the child welfare system. And her goal is family reunification. And the focus is on the mothers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's interesting, we were preparing for a pitch competition, and I learned so much. She's based here in Dallas. When we looked at Dallas County data, 5,000 children in 2021 have been involved in the child welfare system. Of that, 98% identified as Black and Hispanic, right? And so we started talking, what does that really look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens when children are in the system? What happens when children are not reunified with their mom or their father? And it was just an interesting conversation and interesting learning moments for me, because what I realized is that there aren't a lot of services that focus on the parent.
Mm-hmm. True.
And one of the data points that she provided to me, I think it's 40% of the children who are in the child welfare system have a parent. No, 40% of the parents, the mothers who have a child in a child welfare system, were children in the system as well.
My goodness.
So it's about breaking this repetitive cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me of so many stories of, women who have been reunified with all of their children.
Wow.
Situations where moms may not have been reunified with their families, but there were some other dynamics that were happening. And so what she shared was, safety is first for the child, without a doubt. But what she realized in service is that many of the mothers don't have the skills to be a parent. And
Mm.
no one's concentrating in an in-depth way to address some of their traumas that are showing up in their parenting style. And so it was just wow. And when I first met her, it was passion fueled. And
Yeah.
then we started looking at the data, and it changed the trajectory of how she started rebuilding the organization. And now she is on call. Her organization is a referral from hospitals. CPS contacts her as well, because the goal should be family reunification.
Mm-hmm.
Because Texas alone, we are this year, over the last year, we're targeted to spend over $750 million on children and their families that have touched the child welfare system. There's got to be a better way to fix that,
Mm-hmm.
because not fixing it means it's going to be $1 billion problem.
Yep. It's all gonna
Not
keep growing.
it means it's going to go to 1.5 billion. And that shouldn't be,
Right.
because at some point economically, somebody's always going to have to take care of the children. But if parents continue to have children and we've not addressed what their needs are,
Mm-hmm.
then we're going to have this repetitive cycle. And so there's just so many people that when I sit down and I talk to them, I'm like, dang, you have something amazing here.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is really talking from this perspective. People talk about it, but there's something very different when I think about successful nonprofits that the community loves, because it's different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Successful nonprofits that the community loves, and I see the impact and the change.
Mm-hmm.
It's always led by somebody who represents in some way the community that they're serving.
Oh, I love it. Kim, that is so powerful. First of all, thank you for sharing that story, because you bring it. I love when y'all bring in the data. I'm just so engaged in what you're saying.
You know me, I love data, because without data, we just talking. We're just
Yeah.
talking and we lose people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always say, when we're preparing for pitch competitions or talking to potential funders, I always tell people there's somebody in the room that doesn't care about what you're doing. There's somebody in the room that's actually opposed to what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing. So how is it that you can talk to everybody in the room so they at least hear you without compromising the integrity of your work?
Yeah.
And so we do a lot of work, not kind of dumbing down or watering down anything, but I want you to get to the period of your conversation and then let them make that decision. So what do we all understand? Economics.
Yep.
We all want the same thing. We want good families, want good jobs or a good source of income, and we all want to thrive
Mm-hmm.
economically. And if we can kind of link some of our information so it just hits somebody at some point, I just want people to hear your full conversation. And then they can make the decision on their own whether or not they can support, but we won't water down who you are and why you exist and why you serve. And we're always going to justify it with data.
That's so good. That's what when I say y'all, like, if you're any leader, you need to hear this conversation, because it's not just about it's not, it doesn't just apply to nonprofits. So if you're a startup, any organization, because I mean, as a data scientist, I've worked for people and different mentors and been on committees, and the data comes up, and it's so discouraging to hear the conversation turn. It's like, this is what the evidence shows, and totally disregard it.
Yeah.
Like, totally. I'm like,
Yeah.
y'all, then what are we doing? Like,
Yeah.
you had what? Why are you paying me? Like, but it's important. I'm like, if we're showing you what the evidence is,
Mm-hmm.
it's no feelings in it, it's no biases. This is what it shows. It's
Absolutely.
up to you to now make a decision. If you make a decision based on something else, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Like you said, you're not going to probably have your greatest impact, because
Yeah.
you're not hitting the problem. You're
Yeah.
not hitting where the money actually needs to go. You're just doing something to do it. Maybe you do have a heart for it. But I'm
Yes.
like, I mean, it's nothing wrong. I love that people have a passion for their work, but we want you to do your greatest work as opposed to just doing something.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I think many nonprofits get caught up in is maintaining jobs. Right?
Mm,
I don't want to have to fire anybody. I don't want to have to lay off anyone. I don't want to have to reduce salaries. And I think all of that is fine. But if there's no point in that position,
yeah.
job doesn't exist. Right. And so we have shifted sometimes from the mission of the organization and waking up every day, and the goal should be to eradicate whatever problem it is,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not it will happen in your lifetime. The goal is to eradicate it, and that is the position that everybody should approach. But many times people get caught up in the funding,
Mm-hmm.
adjusting the mission, doing some mission drift, and then creating salaries for people because to them it gives the appearance of a more sustainable organization. But if those positions, the people, the funding that you're allocating to the human capital does not lean towards eradicating that mission, then you're not doing it in order, in compliance, or being respectful of the people, the places, and the things that you're serving through that mission. That's where I see a lot of people on the nonprofit side getting caught up. They get caught up, especially founders. This is mine. I created it. It is not yours. All you did was found the paperwork. You will forever be the founder. You will be the visionary for a season, whatever that season looks like. But at the end of the day, you are funded based on public dollars. You rely on multiple sources of funding to operate. Therefore, this is not yours. Your stakeholders have a buy-in in what you're doing, and your board has the legal requirements and the legal obligation to make sound decisions for the organization, even if it doesn't align with your vision or what your expectations are for the organization.
Man, that's good. You mentioned, and I've heard this before, how some organizations kind of get in that cycle of just, I got to get the funding. I get the funding. Like, how do organizations get out of that cycle of just being so money driven and not in a negative, you know what I mean? Not in like a,
Yeah.
they're bad people, but it's
Yeah.
just like my focus continues to be on just staying alive as opposed to doing the work.
Exactly. Many organizations don't have, I can't count, because I was going to say I can, but I can't count the number of organizations that tell me they don't have a board approved budget. So many organizations are operating daily without a budget. They have no financial projections on where they're going, right? And I always liken it to, I'm a political science professor as well. So if the federal government doesn't have an approved budget on the first day of the fiscal year, the government shuts down. People don't go to work unless they are considered an essential employee, right? So why would your nonprofit operate on day one without a budget? Right? So if you don't have a budget, it also means you've not put together a resource development plan. And a resource development plan, if I need to raise $1 million, I need a plan that tells me how I'm going to get there. So if I'm going to have a fundraiser, how much are my expenses going to be? What are my ticket costs going to be? What is going to be the total income, the gross income, and what is the net of the organization? If I'm going after grants, what does the grant cycle look like? If I'm going after individual donations, what's our process? What are the campaigns look like? How often are we doing it? How are we connecting with our donors? Most nonprofits that I engage with, that is an afterthought when it should be the first thought, because you cannot do anything without money.
Right.
And so I talk to a lot of people and they give me estimates. I said, how do you know how do you know you need $10,000? And they just stare. I'm like, did you do any line item budgeting? Because I think you need 25 for that, right? Or you need 2,000 for it. So if you're thinking you need 10 for something and you only need 2, it means that you're putting a whole lot of worry into something that could be an easy fix. Or if you need 25,000, you're going after something that once you get to 10, you still can't do it.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them don't understand, when do you need the money, right? So if you need $1 million, at what points during the year, based on your expenses, do you need the money? How much money do you already have in the bank? What are you putting away in reserves? When I start having those conversations, people start going, well, I just wanted to buy a building or buy a car. I'm like, that's not what we do here, right? We need to know what the money is for. We need to know what is the bare minimum that's needed to run, what enhances it a little bit. So from our basics to our wants and then our wishes, to make it the prettiest thing. But your wishes can get cut down very easily. Your wants can also get cut down, but you need to know what the bare minimum is to run your organization. And I find so many nonprofit leaders and boards have no idea what that number looks like.
Girl, tell the people how to find you, because they they were like, who is this woman?
You
Tell
can
the people how to
find
find
me.
you.
You can find me everywhere online at Just Kim Online. So JustKimOnline. And if you are looking at starting a nonprofit, have already started a nonprofit, you can also follow Cause Studio. That is our initiative name. Same place everywhere on social media, because we put out tips for free, because some of this stuff that we put out, you can Google and find it, or you can go to irs.gov and find it. But we try to arrange and share the information in a way that if this is not your background, it's not overwhelming.
I love that.
Yeah.
Kim, I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much for coming to the Brownstone community and sharing your expertise, sharing the experiences, the stories. I really appreciate it. And I know that I learned something. Okay. So I
I'm
know that
glad.
people learned something. So guys, please connect with Kim online. If you, like she said, if you have a nonprofit and you don't really know what you're doing, please get some help. That is the
Please get
best way
some
you can
help.
serve your community, is to get some
Yeah.
help so you can survive,
Yeah.
and then go to thriving. Y'all, thank you again, Kim. Thank you
Yeah.
for listening, Brownstone community. Y'all connect with Kim, connect with me, Dr. Michelle, on all platforms at Mogul Beginnings, MOGUL. And I'm gonna see y'all next time. Go ahead, Kim. Y'all have a